In 2003, a family of 5. Gone. Vanished from their own home without a trace. For 150 days, no one knew where they had gone. Not even their surviving son, living hundreds of miles away. The town didn't search for them. They whispered. Some said they were glad. And when the truth finally emerged, it was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. They had been murdered. Burned. Buried near their mountain home. But the question that haunted investigators was simple. Who could hate a family enough to erase them from existence? April 2003. The French Alps. The village of Laguet-Bonnet sits nestled in the mountains of eastern France. A place of beauty. Of ski resorts and chalets. Where wealthy tourists come to escape. But in this small alpine community, something dark was brewing. A family had made enemies. More enemies than they knew. And on April 11th, those enemies would act. This is the story of the Flactif family. A story of jealousy. Of greed. And of a crime so calculated, it would change French forensic investigation forever. Xavier Flactif was 41 years old. A property developer who had moved to the Alps in 1999 with dreams of success. He was flamboyant. Confident. The kind of man who filled a room with energy. His business model was simple. Buy cheap mountain land. Build luxury chalets. Sell them to foreign investors. For a while, it worked. His garage held expensive cars and motorcycles. His family took extravagant vacations. Their 3-story chalet overlooked the village like a monument to his success. But Xavier had a past. In 1998, he had been convicted of tax fraud. Banned from operating a business for 10 years. So he put everything in his wife's name. And continued building his empire. 36-year-old Ghislaine was Xavier's opposite. Warm. Quiet. Deeply private. She had a teenage son, Mario, from a previous relationship. Together with Xavier, she had built a loving blended family. Their oldest daughter, Sarah, was 10 years old. Bright. Curious. Teachers described her as intelligent and well-regarded. She loved reading and drawing. 9-year-old Letitia was the athlete. A gifted skier with a shelf full of medals. Coaches said she had real potential. Graceful on the slopes. Fearless. The youngest was 7-year-old Gregory. Gentle. Sweet. The kind of boy who sought comfort in his mother's arms. He loved playing quietly while his sisters ran circles around him. The Flactifs seemed to have it all. A beautiful home. Successful business. 3 healthy children. But beneath the surface, Xavier's empire was crumbling. He owed nearly €3 million in debt. His latest project had been denied planning permission. But he had already taken money from investors. Money for buildings that would never be built. The pressure was mounting. And in a small village like Laguet-Bonnet, enemies were everywhere. Former employees claimed he hadn't paid them. Neighbors said he was arrogant. Business rivals accused him of driving up land prices. The resentment was real. And it was growing. April 11th, 2003. A Friday afternoon. The children came home from school around 5:10. Phone records would later confirm they were alive at 5:29. But not for long. Someone entered the Flactif home that evening. Someone who knew them. Someone who had been planning this. 7-year-old Gregory was in the kitchen. Snacking at the dining table with his sister Sarah. He was killed first. Not with a gun. With blunt force trauma. Beaten repeatedly with a piece of firewood. His baby teeth were shattered. Fragments would later be found embedded in the floorboards. 10-year-old Sarah witnessed her brother's murder. She tried to run. Tried to reach the front door. But she didn't make it. She was killed the same way. Blood spatter was found at head height near the entrance. 9-year-old Letitia was upstairs. hiding behind her sister's bed. She had heard the screams. She knew something terrible was happening. She was found and killed with the same weapon. Ghislaine had been in the basement, doing laundry. The noise of the washing machine had masked the sounds of her children being murdered. She was killed on the stairs. As she made her way back up, blood spatter showed repeated blows to the face. Drag marks on the staircase revealed that her body had been moved back down to the basement. One mercy. She died without knowing what had happened to her children. Xavier arrived home at 6:45. Phone records confirmed the exact time. He walked into the house and saw his family dead. He was the only one shot. Gunpowder residue was found on the furniture and curtains. The killer knew Xavier would fight back, so he used a gun. One shot. Execution style. The Flactif family had been annihilated. But the killer wasn't finished. He had to hide the evidence. April 13, 2003. 2 days after the murders, police arrived at the Flactif chalet. They were conducting a routine missing persons investigation. The family's red Toyota Land Cruiser was gone. Xavier was known for reckless driving. The initial theory seemed obvious. A car accident. Helicopters searched the mountain roads. Teams combed the forests and ravines. But they found nothing. No wreckage. No skid marks. No sign of the bright red SUV. So investigators returned to the house. They ordered a second, more thorough search. 10 days after the family disappeared. And that's when things became strange. 2 laptops that had been sitting open during the first search. Gone. Phones. Gone. A file containing legal documents and property plans. Gone. Someone had been back inside the house and taken them. Police began investigating Xavier's finances. What they found was staggering. 71 bank accounts. Most in his wife's name. He was drowning in debt, facing lawsuits from angry investors, and had recently been denied permits for his biggest project. By early May, the theory had shifted. The Flactifs had fled the country. Then, the missing Toyota was discovered. 50 kilometers away. Across the Swiss border. Abandoned in a parking garage at Geneva Airport. It looked like the perfect escape plan. Drive to Switzerland. Ditch the car. Disappear. The media ran with the story. Headlines painted Xavier as a con man on the run. A modern-day swindler who had skipped town to avoid his creditors. But Mario Blanc, Ghislaine's teenage son, refused to believe it. He insisted his mother would never leave without telling him. She called him every single day. She would have found a way to warn him. Something was wrong. And Mario wouldn't stop saying it. Suspects and evidence. May 23, 2003. More than a month after the family disappeared, police launched a third search of the chalet. This time, they brought forensic specialists. The evidence crew moved through the house inch by inch. Photographing. Swabbing. Collecting. And they began to find things the naked eye had missed. Scattered throughout the children's bedrooms were minuscule fragments. Sharp. Porcelain-like. One detective described it as though very thin glass had splintered. But when analyzed in the crime lab, the truth was disturbing. It was tooth enamel. Microscopic fragments of children's teeth. Beneath a curtain in the living room, investigators found a single shell casing. 6.35 mm. No bullet holes in the walls. But someone had fired a weapon inside this house. On one of the staircases, a small square of carpet had been cut out. Removed. Why? What had it been hiding? The forensic team noted that the entire chalet had been meticulously cleaned. Scrubbed. Wiped. Sanitized. But upon closer inspection, they found tiny brown flecks. Traces of dried blood. This was not the home of a family who had fled. This was a crime scene. The following day, a specialist forensic unit arrived. They brought something revolutionary. Blue Star. A luminol-based spray capable of detecting even the faintest traces of blood. Blood that had been thoroughly cleaned. Washed away. It could detect blood diluted up to 1 part in 100,000. When sprayed on a surface, it reacts with iron and hemoglobin. And glows bright blue in the dark. The forensic team sprayed the interior of the Flactif chalet. And turned off the lights. The kitchen lit up. Blood everywhere. On the walls. On the floors. On the tables. By the children's beds. Drag marks leading up the basement steps. The beautiful Alpine chalet had been the site of unspeakable violence. And someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to scrub it clean. The case was no longer a missing persons investigation. It was a murder inquiry. Forensic analysts worked around the clock, processing over 1,000 pieces of evidence. Blood samples were sent to the lab for DNA testing. The results confirmed what investigators feared. Blood from all 5 members of the Flactif family was present. Xavier, Ghislaine, Sarah, Letitia, Gregory. But there was something else. A 6th DNA profile. Blood from an unknown contributor. Found in both the chalet and inside the abandoned Toyota. Was this person an additional victim? Or were they the killer? 80 members of the French police force were now involved. Helicopters continued searching caves and waterways. Sniffer dogs combed the forests. But no bodies were found. Police began collecting DNA samples. Starting with remaining family members. Working outward through neighbors. Business associates. Former employees. More than 300 people provided saliva swabs. Everyone cooperated. Except one person. 31-year-old David Hodiat. A local mechanic. And neighbor of the Flactifs. He flatly refused. Investigators had noticed him before. In a television interview shortly after the disappearance. He and his partner, Alexandra Lurit, had openly expressed their contempt for Xavier. But it was something David said to the reporter that caught attention. He mentioned there may have been carnage inside the house. This was days before any blood had been discovered. How did he know? Detectives had already been watching David closely. They had tapped his phone weeks earlier. And heard him telling Alexandra he was going to refuse the DNA test. His behavior was suspicious. He had been using binoculars to watch the forensic team's work. Obsessively tracking their progress. When police told David that refusing made him look guilty, he finally relented. 48 hours later, the results came back. It was a match. David Hodiat's DNA was the 6th trace. Investigators now had their prime suspect. But they didn't move immediately. They wanted to be certain Alexandra was involved. So they continued tapping David's phone. On August 14, 2003, 4 months after the family vanished, they intercepted a chilling conversation. Alexandra told David she hadn't been feeling well since April. David asked carefully what happened in April. Alexandra replied they should be careful. Their lives could be ruined all of a sudden. Over the following weeks, more intercepted calls implicated another local couple. Stefan and Isabel Coral. David and Alexandra were worried they wouldn't keep their mouths shut. On September 16, police made their move. David was stopped on his way to work. Pulled from his car. Arrested for murder. At the same time, officers raided his home. Alexandra was arrested. Their 2 young children were taken into protective custody. Stefan and Isabel Coral were arrested hours later. Suspected of helping cover up the crime. Faced with the DNA evidence, David Hodiat cracked. Within 30 minutes of questioning, he confessed. He claimed he had gone to the Flactif chalet on April 11 to discuss money Xavier owed him. A few €100 for odd jobs and cleaning work Alexandra had done. According to David, it turned into a heated argument. He had brought a pistol for intimidation, he claimed. But the gun went off accidentally, killing Xavier instantly. In a panic, David said he decided to eliminate the witnesses. He shot each member of the family one by one, wrapped their bodies in bedsheets, loaded them into the Toyota Land Cruiser. He scrubbed the house clean, collected several canisters of petrol, and drove 10 kilometers to the woods near the village of Thones. There, he said he burned all 5 bodies to destroy the evidence. Then he abandoned the car at Geneva Airport to make it look like the family had fled. David claimed he had acted alone. Detectives couldn't believe what they were hearing. This man had wiped out an entire family, 3 young children included. Over a few €100. But something troubled them about his confession. When they interviewed Alexandra and the Corals, their statements mirrored David's so closely it felt rehearsed, scripted. David guided police to a remote spot in the Thones forest, the site of the fire pit. 5 months had passed since the blaze. Among the ash and debris, investigators found very little. Fragments of bone, a few teeth, and the rim from Sarah's glasses. According to David, it had taken roughly 3 hours for the fire to completely consume the bodies. Forensic experts knew this was impossible. To test David's timeline, investigators conducted an experiment. They recreated the fire using pig carcasses, common in forensic reconstruction due to their similar properties to human tissue. After 3 hours, the pigs were only 20% cremated. Experts determined that to fully destroy 5 human bodies, the fire would need to be enormous, requiring approximately 800 kilograms of wood, and burning continuously for roughly 2 days. The fire pit would have needed to be prepared well in advance. This wasn't an argument gone wrong. This was premeditated murder. And it would have been impossible for one man to achieve what David claimed. Moving 5 bodies alone, dragging each of them into the forest, gathering nearly a ton of wood, tending the fire for 48 hours, cleaning every surface of the chalet so thoroughly that only Bluestar could detect the blood. David Hodiat could not have acted alone. With this new evidence, the accomplices began to talk. And what they revealed was far more sinister than anyone had imagined. David Hodiat and Xavier Flactif had once been friends. Both were from northern France. Both had modest upbringings. But Xavier seemed to accumulate wealth effortlessly, while David struggled to make ends meet. What began as admiration quickly turned to bitter jealousy. David and Alexandra grew obsessed with the Flactif's lifestyle. The luxury cars, the large chalet, the ski trips, the designer clothes. They resented everything the family had. And they weren't alone in their hatred. Stefan and Isabel Coral had also been lured to Lagat Bonnet by Xavier's promises. Like David and Alexandra, they felt cheated, disillusioned. The 4 became close friends, bonding over their mutual disdain for Xavier. It started as casual gossip, complaints over drinks, jokes about how satisfying it would be to see Xavier taken down. But then the jokes stopped being funny. They turned serious. The 4 began sabotaging Xavier. Graffiti on his properties, siphoning gas from his cars, and eventually, arson. David and Stefan set fire to one of his chalets under construction. According to Alexandra, the situation escalated in January 2003. When David watched a documentary about an Italian serial killer, Alfredo Stranieri, a man who murdered victims to steal their property. After watching the program, David became fixated on making the Flactifs disappear. He told Alexandra that Stranieri was an idiot. He got caught because he buried the bodies. They won't find anything at my place because I'll burn them. The murders were meticulously planned over months. Stefan later revealed that the original plan was to kill the family on April 9, 2 days before it actually happened. The plan was brutal. Stefan would strangle the children with a rope. David would shoot the parents with a pistol. But when the two men arrived at the Flactif chalet that night, Stefan lost his nerve. He couldn't go through with it. An argument erupted. David accused Stefan of cowardice. David rescheduled for April 11th. And this time he went alone. Using cutting-edge laser technology to analyze blood spatter patterns, investigators pieced together the timeline. The children arrived home from school around 5:10 in the afternoon. Phone records indicate they were still alive at 5:29. But not for long. David entered the property shortly after. Likely through an unlocked door. He found Gregory and Sarah snacking at the dining table. 7-year-old Gregory was the first to die. Contrary to David's claim that all victims were shot, forensic analysis told a different story. Gregory's blood spatter, combined with fragments of baby teeth embedded in the floorboards, proved he was killed by repeated blows from a blunt object. Most likely a piece of firewood, which was then burned in the fireplace to destroy evidence. 10-year-old Sarah witnessed her younger brother's murder. She tried to escape through the front door. But David caught up with her. She too was bludgeoned to death. A projection of her blood was discovered at head height on the wall near the entrance. David then made his way upstairs where he found 9-year-old Letitia hiding behind her sister's bed. She had evidently heard the screams of her siblings. She was killed by blows from the same weapon. Meanwhile, Ghislaine had been in the basement laundry room, unable to hear the commotion over the noise of the washing machine. She was killed on the stairs as she made her way back up to the main floor, leaving blood spatter indicative of repeated blows to the face. The drag marks on the staircase were left when David brought her body back down to the basement. One small mercy. Ghislaine died unaware of what had happened to her children. Xavier arrived home at 6:45 in the evening. Phone records confirm the exact time. Upon entering the chalet, he saw the bodies of his family scattered throughout the house. Gunpowder residue found on the armchairs and curtains shows that he was the only victim shot with the pistol. Likely because David knew Xavier would fight back. According to Stefan Corral's testimony, he and David spent the next 2 days building and tending to the massive fire in the Thones forest. David sent the pistol to his brother in northern France, asking him to dispose of it. It was later recovered from a river. The accomplices helped clean the chalet, remove evidence, and staged the scene to look like the family had fled. David even drove the Toyota to Geneva Airport himself, then took a train back to Laguebonnet. A month after his arrest, David Hodiat retracted his confession and changed his story. He now claimed that when he arrived at the Flactif chalet on April 11th, he discovered 2 unknown individuals had already murdered the family. According to this new version, these strangers coerced him under duress into helping them dispose of the bodies. The story fell apart immediately, under the weight of forensic evidence, eyewitness testimony, and phone records. But David stuck with it all the way to trial. 3 psychological evaluations revealed disturbing traits: narcissism, compulsive control, and avoidance of responsibility. Psychiatrists described him as a man prone to extreme actions, with an exceptional ability to compartmentalize his feelings and avoid confronting difficult situations. Despite his claims of impaired consciousness during the crimes, psychiatrists found no evidence of any mental disorder that would lessen his criminal responsibility. David Hodiat was quite simply a jealous, calculating killer. The trial began on June 12, 2006. More than 3 years after the murders. It lasted 3 weeks and captivated the entire nation. Prosecutors argued that Alexandra Luret was the mastermind behind the murders, that she had blown on the embers and cleaned up the ashes. They maintained she manipulated David, encouraged his obsession, and helped orchestrate the cover-up. At the end of the trial, the sentences were handed down. David Hodiat, life imprisonment with a minimum term of 22 years. Alexandra Luret, 10 years. Stephen Coral, 15 years. Isabel Coral, 7 years. Michel Hodiet, David's brother who disposed of the gun. 1 year probation. David initially appealed the court's decision, but he withdrew his appeal on the first day of the new trial. Today, the 3 accomplices have served their time and are free. David Hodiet, now 51 years old, has displayed exemplary behavior in prison and is eligible for parole consideration in 2025. The Flactif Family Massacre remains one of the most shocking crimes in modern French history. Not because of its brutality, but because of its motive. 4 people conspired to murder an entire family, including 3 innocent children, out of nothing more than envy. They wanted what Xavier and Ghislaine had built: the chalet, the cars, the lifestyle. And when they couldn't have it, they destroyed it. But questions remain. How could jealousy transform into something so monstrous? David Hodiet and Stephen Coral weren't desperate criminals. They were neighbors, friends, people Xavier had trusted. And they planned his family's execution for months. The psychological evaluations revealed narcissism and manipulation. But they didn't reveal a full explanation. How does a person watch a documentary about a serial killer and decide to replicate it? How does someone beat 3 children to death over money they felt they were owed? Ghislaine Flactif, Sarah Flactif, Letitia Flactif, Gregory Flactif.